Do most synagogues start with meditation like on Saturday morning? No. I don't do this every single week, but we do it on Open Door Shabbat. And we'll come back to it. It's actually like, I spent like the last 2 years kind of doing Jewish meditation training and going on like silent retreats and things like that. I find that it is very helpful. Believe it or not, in the earliest records of what we now call like traditional synagogue prayer, there are legends that people used to come and meditate an hour before synagogue started and meditate an after hour was over. So if you think that synagogue is too long, imagine adding an extra hour of silence on the front and back of it. We're not going to make it an hour, but it's good for us. And you don't really need any pre-existing knowledge to do it. But this week, we're going to do a meditation that's called the loving kindness meditation. And the loving kindness meditation it's not a Jewish meditation, but it's a meditation about finding your way to love people you despise, which, might be something that people are thinking about this week. We're not very political on the bima here. The truth is, no matter what you think about this past week's election, chances are the person who made the opposite choice of what you made has pretty negative feelings about you. So there's like a need for, I think, that like in the moment. And I love the loving kindness meditation for this reason. You don't need to know that much about meditation to do it. Meditation is just focusing on your breathing. I find that it's helpful to have just a good posture, and if you want to close your eyes, you can. The loving kindness meditation is about expanding our field of vision. Which is something that most of us are not so great about. So what I want you to do is just kind of close your eyes and breathe. And picture someone who loves you very, very much. Maybe that person is right here in this room, or it's just someone else in your world, but just imagine them looking at you. And imagine that person who loves you looking you in the eye and saying, may you be safe and protected and free from inner and outer harm. May you be happy and contented. May you be healthy and whole. May you experience ease of well-being. Now imagine that after that person says it to you, that you say it back to yourself. Because this is a person who loves you. And it's a person who, when they say that to you, you believe it. So say it to yourself quietly. May I be safe and protected and free from inner and outer harm. May I be happy and contented. May I be healthy and whole to whatever degree possible. May I experience ease of well-being. You might think that it's strange to focus on yourself, on a meditation that I've already told you is about learning to love other people, but the truth is that we're not separate from the rest of the world. So before you play your instrument for the rest of the world, you need to make sure that it's properly tuned. So now I want you to turn your field of vision a little wider to some of the people you love the most. Take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. Stare at those people in your mind with the same love and tenderness that this other person was staring back at you. And with that same level of tenderness, say to them, may you be safe and protected and free from inner and outer harm. May you be happy and contented. May you be healthy and whole. May you experience ease. And expand your vision a little further. Direct it to a large group of people that you feel identified with. Maybe it's religion or gender, or maybe it's people who are left-handed, people who like baseball, or people who like coffee. Just try and imagine that whole mass of people and saying to them the same words with the same degree of tenderness. May you be safe and protected and free from inner and outer harm. May you be happy and contented. May you be healthy and whole. May you experience ease of well-being. Expand that even further and think about it, our whole planet. Imagine what it would be like to look at the world with a degree of tenderness, given all the suffering that it's experiencing right now. Imagine you're so far away that you can see the picture of how the Earth looks when you see it from a spaceship. And say, may all beings, near and far, be safe and protected and free from inner and outer harm. May all beings be happy and contented. May all beings be healthy and whole to whatever degree possible. May they experience ease of well-being. And now I want you to picture someone that you despise, or someone who just evokes very heavy negative emotions in you. Visualize them and try to find in your heart the way to say the same words that someone with tenderness would have said to you. May you be safe and free from harm. May you be happy. May you be healthy. May you experience ease, well-being. Imagine how the body language of that person would change were you to come with them in that posture. And imagine them saying it back to you. that, we're going to take 10 minutes to sit quietly in silence. If you feel ready, you can open your eyes. Oh, there are more people in here than when I closed my eyes 10 minutes ago. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Hello, Andy. Hi, David. This is our first Open Door Shabbat of the year. And I'm so delighted that you're here. So the way, as a reminder, the way that I did this last year is that we kind of structure our time together where we're going a little more in depth and doing a little less than we ordinarily would. So the first part of what we're going to do is to just take a deeper look into each part of a Shabbat morning service, parts that we skip over entirely or like rush through without even really thinking about. Then we will do like a shorter Torah reading than normal, along with more looking at the Torah portion instead of me only speaking about it. And then what we do rest depends on where things go. If you don't have a Siddur or a Chumash, you should get one if you don't. Welcome back, Brighton. Someone this morning asked if you were a New York Knicks fan and that's why you had an orange kippot for your bar mitzvah. No? Okay. She left now. She left, the person, but I kind of wanted. I promised her I'd ask. So I hope everybody's having a good Saturday. If you just arrived this morning for a meditation, we did what's called a loving kindness meditation, which is a mental a visualization exercise about how to start developing some tenderness or love for people you might despise, which, can't imagine why anyone wouldn't want to think about that this week. I made that joke already, but some of you just arrived and heard it. Okay. Turn in your Siddurim to page 66. So this is a part of the service that we don't do here. It's even in places that might do it, like on a Shabbat morning, it's usually done silently and very, very quickly. I don't really know any places that like sing it out loud. But in a slightly more traditional service, you would see it. But it's a passage that someone has to I see someone hiding back there. I think that might be Artie. Artie, is that you? I think he stopped, which means I think that he knows that I discovered him. Okay. Anyways, it's all good. So could I get someone to read the second non-indented paragraph, which says "Master of all worlds"? Could anyone mind reading in the English for me that paragraph? Master of all worlds, not upon our merit. Alex, thank you.
Master of all worlds, not upon our merit do we rely on our supplication, but upon your boundless love. What are we? What is our life? What is our height? What is our righteousness? What is our intelligence, our power, our might? What can we say, Adonai, our God, the God of our ancestors? Compared to you, all of our are nothing. The famous insignificant. The wise lack wisdom, the clever lack reason. Our actions, for all their profuseness, are meaningless. The days of our lives, emptiness. Human preeminence over beasts is illusion, but all this is.
Okay, so for those who have been to Open Door Shabbat, I've asked this question before. If you haven't been here before, so if you've been here before, it's a reminder. If you've never been to one before, it'll be the first time you're hearing it. So, regardless of what you believe about who wrote the Torah that we're going to read, almost everything in the Siddur is written by people. So unless it's from the Torah, there's no question it had to be written by a human being somewhere, no matter what you believe about the Torah. So this is one of those passages, and I'd like you to imagine, like, tell me about a person who would decide to sit down one day and write the paragraph that Alex just read. Like, why would someone sit down and write something like that?
I feel someone who's struggling. Like, I imagine that's a person thinking about a cancer diagnosis or a tough pain that puts them in a place where they don't have as much control as they want. And all of a sudden, the idea that there's someone who has all the control is so much more important.
Love it. Other possibilities? By the way, I don't know the right answer. I don't know the right answer to this question, so I think Amy's answer is a really good one. But I actually don't know what the answer is. So, Lauren.
I was thinking about more like kind of somebody struggling with like a feeling of beings and has like a nihilism kind of feeling internally and wanting to find meaning.
Yeah, I think there's definitely a little bit of both in here of like I'm feeling powerless over everything. Maybe there's just no meaning to anything when I feel like things are completely out of control, out of my control. Sam?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. So probably written by a rabbi, a priest, like some sort of religious reader, writer. And I do think that part of what they're writing too is like an early elite class, like of political rulers and powers and stuff. And they're trying to remind them that as much as you plan and want control and power, you don't have it. That in fact, life is in God's hands in some way.
I mean, it's what?
Nothing to say.
You said damn it. That's the most interesting part of your statement. It was a good statement, but I want to know why you said that.
Said what?
You ended with the word damn it, so I want to know why you said that.
No, I didn't. Sorry. I didn't.
No, I'm not bothered by that. I'm saying like
I?
you finished with that, and I feel like that there's something interesting there. So let's go. Oh,
I didn't. I don't even realize I said damn it.
Okay.
Slip, yeah.
I still think it was interesting, but like, some of you might have heard this, that like in the Torah, one commandment that is only reserved for kings is that a king is supposed to write a Sefer Torah. But this is actually like a mitzvah, like a commandment for the king actually has to write a Sefer Torah. I think that there's a little bit of that in what maybe Sam is saying, which like part of the reason they have to write a Sefer Torah is, well, as anyone has ever knows anything about writing a Sefer Torah, it takes a long time. It is a very careful and meticulous process. So the idea that like a person who has a lot of power would just like sit down and have to start from scratch and write that thing involves a lot of care and time. And they're kind of forced to sit there with the words of something that's kind of reminding them that they're not as powerful as their title might suggest. Anyone else? Who has any thoughts on who might have written such a thing? Okay. Now let's read the second paragraph, because there's always most Jewish texts and prayers involve like a pivot, like the sort of like I'm going to take you down and then I'm going to build you back up again. So we've sort of this. I think we can maybe agree that this first paragraph is not the most optimistic, uplifting. So there's got to be a pivot somewhere. Can someone look at the second paragraph? We, however. Janet, thank you.
We, however, are your people, partners to your covenant, descendants of your beloved Abraham, to whom you made a pledge on Mount Moriah. We are the heirs of Isaac, his son, bound upon the altar. We are your firstborn people, the congregation of Isaac's son Jacob, whom you named Israel in judgment because of your love for him and your delight in him.
Yeah, so why? This is true, like in a lot of religions, and no, Judaism is no different. Like, why the emphasis on like all the people in the past and the things that God did? Like, we spend a lot of time like wondering like if these people were real, which is fine. Like, we can discuss that too. But why like invoke them in this way? Like, how does that answer anything about the first paragraph? I have no idea if they were written by the same person, by the way. I'm assuming that they were, but like, assuming that they were, why link them that way? David?
The first paragraph is about, the thoughts going on inside their head. The second paragraph is about the stories in the Torah. And to me, it's like timeless to the Torah, and you creating a connection to the Torah. To the people.
Sure. Absolutely. There's also an element of, think about last week's Torah portion, right? And what was last week's Torah portion about? What? Can you just remind everybody who wasn't here to hear, who heard your speech for your Devar Torah? Like, what happened in Noah? Yeah, pretty good. Did you come this week because of Rabbi Chuck telling you making you promise on the bima that you were going to come back? No, or that was your mom? Okay, okay. So, but last week, right? Like last week we read the story of Noah and the flood, right? Where the world is destroyed and God promises not to do it again. It's interesting, right? Because in the first paragraph, it talks a lot about God being so much more powerful than us. But there are sneaky moments in Jewish tradition where actually we have the power over God. And the story of Noah is one of these stories because basically God can't break God's own promise. If God were to break God's own promise, then God in some sense is like not living up to the ideals of like what God is commanding everyone else to do. So God makes this promise, I'm not going to destroy you ever again. Which sort of means that no matter what people do, God can't break God's own promise. People, on the other hand, break promises all the time, right? Like, and get away with it in some sense. Like one subtle thing I think is going on here is that it's by invoking these other people, it's sort of reminding us, like, like you signed the contract. Like, your part of the contract was not to forget us and like not to give up on us. And I like to think about that it's not totally a sinister take, but it's actually more of a patient take. It's like, you said you weren't going to give up on us. Like, as much as you might want to, you said you weren't going to give up on us. And so I think that this is where part of this is like, you don't have to do any of this, but you said you would. So, don't give up on us, right? Don't give up on us. Next passage. Therefore, it is our duty to thank and praise you. Litza, thank you.
Therefore, it is our duty to thank you and praise you, to glorify and sanctify your name. How good is our portion, how blessed our lot, how beautiful our heritage. How blessed are we, twice each day, morning and evening, we are privileged to declare.
Keep going.
Hear, O Israel, Adonai is our God, Adonai alone. Praise be God's glorious sovereignty for the most.
Well, this is a passage that some of you may recognize, right? Which is, if you look on the right, Litza says this, and then it sends you right into the first line of the Shema. So actually, it's funny because it's the first time, if you know a prayer in Judaism, no matter how knowledgeable you are of the Siddur, the Shema is probably the one that you know the best. Because it's short, it's to the point. I've never been to a synagogue anywhere in the world that does not say it, no matter what flavor of Judaism it is. But actually, when we say the Shema in shul, it's actually not the first time we would say it. It actually would be here. And so in some sense, it's like, this is a text that's talking to us about like why, how prayer is kind of supposed to mirror the way we feel in moments. Like, we're saying Shema because we're remembering that there's something we're praying to that just isn't willing to give up on us. That isn't willing to give up on us. Who might be some people in this moment in time who feel the need to be remembered that someone won't give up on them?
I mean, all of us, the world's a pretty crazy place right now.
Yeah. So the world, I mean, you could say like the world is what else? People who might feel like they need to know that there's something that's just not going to give up on them.
Talked to a friend the other day who works the Trevor Project hotline. She said,
Can you explain what the Trevor Project is for people?
I hate to do it on this justice, but it's a queer support organization. And she said you can't put down, the second you put down the phone, it rings again. Trans kids are calling in every 3 minutes, and he's got to start a trans genocide. There's nothing for you. What am I supposed to do? I've been thinking about that a lot since she told me that story. There are people who, I feel like it's not the outcome I was hoping for this election, but that happens to me a lot in my lifetime, and I live through all those other times. And I'll probably live through this one, and I'll probably be okay. But it was a really clear indication there are some people who are genuinely didn't feel like just a bad outcome, but felt like that world-ending, horrifying outcome. I don't know if that was the question you're asking.
I think that I think that there's no question, regardless of how anyone feels about, I think I've said this quote before, my apologies, but like I like to remind people that always like God is not a Democrat or a Republican or a member of the Likud party or the Labor Party, like any political party, right? God is just God. But like the answer can be the question could be answered in a lot of ways. I think your answer is absolutely correct on a factual level, at least the way that if I were someone who identifies as non-binary, given what's been said, I would imagine that this would be a week where I would want to feel like there's something that's not going to give up on me. I agree. Anyone else? Doesn't have to, again, it doesn't, I mean, it could be about recent events, but just in general, like, Lauren.
Kids in general, like just children.
Children, yeah. What about the hostages? Like, we don't really know, we don't know at this point, like, who's alive and who's dead. Many of the hostages were all over the map religiously. Actually, said that they probably skewed on the non-religious side because unless they were soldiers, because the majority of them were captured on a day that was a Jewish holiday. So presumably they wouldn't have been at the festival if they were observing the holiday. But like there were soldiers who were religious. I want to still believe that people are alive, and if I'm sitting there, God knows where, I would like to know that there's something not giving up on me. What little I've ever read about like being a hostage from people who have come back from Gaza, or just like people held captive in Iran in the 1970s or during Vietnam, is that like one of the strategies that people use as hostages is trying to tell them everyone's forgotten about you. That's a great way to kill someone's spirit, especially if you want them to tell you things that, that that's part of it. So like, maybe that's a person right now who just needs to remember that someone hasn't forgotten about me. Anyone else? I mean, the answers are potentially endless, and it's I will confess that it's like one of the most powerful spiritual ideas for me as like a Jewish person, where like, and it's also where, you know, I have like tremendous respect for a person who just tells me I've thought really hard about this and I can't bring myself to like believe in God. It's all right, like we can still be friends. It's all good. It's all good for me, right? But the biggest reason I refuse to not believe it is I feel like I need to believe that there's something that just won't give up on me. And I'm, you know, apropos Amy's comment, like I don't feel like this week I've gone through different emotions about that, because I woke up on Wednesday and I knew that there were people who felt that way, but I didn't really feel it that much myself, because I didn't feel so much in the category of someone for whom, if I didn't like the result of what happened on Tuesday, I would have felt immediately frightened by it. So I felt that, I knew that other people were feeling that way, but I wasn't feeling it myself. I woke up on Friday morning, or whenever I first heard about what happened in Amsterdam, and then I felt that way. Like, meaning I didn't, like, I had the opportunity to feel that way after that, but then my wife like tells me, like, you know, WTF, like this thing happened in Amsterdam. Those were her exact words. I'm quoting her. That's a rabbinic quote from Rabbi Hammerman. Like saying, like, I woke up and being like, yeah, okay, now I get it. Please tell me that there's someone who's not going to give up on me when, you know, the Israeli army basically had to fly to a European country to remove Jews from a European country where they didn't feel safe. So, you know, to me, like I think there's something really powerful about reminding yourself about it. You know, and you can ascribe it to whatever you want, but the idea that just like something's not going to give up on me. You know, you don't really know when you'll need it. You don't really know when you'll need it. What time is it? 10:55. The funny thing about the next passage, go to the top of 67, I'm going to read it, this is actually where there's a blessing. And it's actually one of my favorite blessings that we just don't actually say. This is why like not going through these parts of the Siddur is such a shame, which is mainly for time reasons, right? But like it actually like has things that like, if we knew those things, we might use them more. So this passage in English, right? You are eternal before creation and since creation. In this world and in the world to come, manifest your holiness through those who hallow you, raising us to dignity and strength. Praised are you, Adonai, manifesting your holiness to all of humanity. So in a Jewish prayer book, right, like the blessing, the Baruch Atah Adonai is generally considered the end of the passage. So this one here is Baruch Atah Adonai Mikadesh et Shimcha Barabim. That praised are you, God, who makes your name holy, Birabim, who makes your name holy through humanity. You know, it's a nice blessing to keep in your pocket, in your mental pocket when you don't feel great about the world. Like there's no other occasion that we say it, but it's a nice blessing to have at certain points in time. I was saying this to Sam as we were getting started, and setting aside that God is not a Democrat or a Republican, and we have 501c3 status, so we don't endorse political candidates at a synagogue, nor should we, right? My hunch is that the majority of our community, of this synagogue, did not vote for the winner of the presidential election. I don't know what the percentage is, but I'm willing to bet that it was not 51% of the synagogue. I'm also not willing to say that it was 100%, but if it's 51%, then I clearly don't know people here as well as I think I do. That's not the sense I get. And truth be told, I didn't vote for the winner of the presidential election. It actually was very hard for me to even imagine. A friend asked me, like, what would have to happen? What would have to change about this world for you to vote for, what would the alternative world have been where you actually would have? And it's like, it almost like broke my brain because I can't like imagine this. And when I was confessing to Sam this morning, because this again is not actually, it's going to be more confessional than like insulting to someone who made a different decision than me, is that like, actually what I was thinking on Wednesday was, this must be what bigotry feels like to be giving bigotry out rather than being the recipient of it. I've never really been the recipient of bigotry, like face to face. Others are not so lucky, but like I haven't felt like me personally, like one-on-one, ever felt that way about being Jewish. But the things I was saying in my head, I felt like were the kind of things that you only say when you are passing the realm of like disagreeing with someone to like actually, I was saying to Sam, like the things that were going on in my head were like, these people just shouldn't be allowed to vote anymore. I gotta save them from themselves. Like that's bigotry, right? Like it's not, I'm not proud of it, but I also have a hunch that maybe I'm not the only one who might have said something like that in my head. And it's weird. It's a weird thing to think about. And then I was, praying, like I pray every day, putting on my towels and tefillin, and I'm going through this, and I'm like, oh, praise to you, God, who sanctifies your name through humanity, through all the people. So, this is like, it's actually one of the sneakily very challenging things about recognizing that like God doesn't feel about our enemies the way we feel about them. Like God makes very clear over and over again, like, that's not how I roll. That looks like.
Yeah, I'm just curious how you interpret manifesting miracle is it that God is within even those that seem to be so outside of what God is to us? Or is it that we as members of humanity are charged with manifesting the will of God?
It's a fantastic question. I think it's partially why the blessing leaves itself like so open in that way. I think that, I think maybe for me, I kind of look at it as like God wanted human beings to be really messy. I guess it's like my best answer, but I always think about it like from zooming in and zooming out, and just like, if I were God, which I'm not, right? Spoiler alert, right? If I were God and I was like zooming out from like everything that goes on in the world, it would probably be hard for God to say, well, God, if God's like defending God's actions, they'd probably say, have you been paying attention? Like at any point in time, there is somewhere on this earth where people are doing just horrible, horrible things to each other and saying horrible things to each other. Like it might be where you are right now, but it wasn't where you were 20 years ago, and it might not be where you are 20 years from now. So God's just constantly watching that kind of conflict. And I don't know. I think maybe that's part of how God makes peace with their promise not to destroy the humanity after Noah. It's sort of like, I'm not going to destroy all of you. You might destroy each other though. If you aren't thinking about it, you might destroy each other. And that's sort of, I guess that's kind of where my head goes with it. But again, it's all interpretation and just mine. But I suspect that not alone in wondering those things. And then there are people who are feeling it very like vividly in the ever, so I don't know. Anyone else have any other thoughts about this? Oh, more let's go, please. Don't apologize.
It feels to me like that first paragraph is the sorts of sentiments that come unbidden, just based on what we see in the world. And then the subsequent paragraphs are epic. Like, you have to make yourself believe that we are special, that God cares, and that therefore we have to make the effort to praise and sanctify. That part is work, but that first paragraph is, like what your natural responses to the other things are like.
Oh, interesting. I see what you mean. Like there's your instinct, and then there's like sort of the actual work you have to do. It's been weird to think about it. I wasn't expecting to be like kind of pushed by this week, but I figured since it was first open door Shabbat, I was also going to confess a little bit. Because I do feel like there's elements of the kind of environment we're living in right now, where there's just people are not able to talk about the less pleasant part of this whole picture that might live inside of us. So I guess who better than a rabbi to volunteer the confession first? But that's definitely how I've been feeling. And I felt differently when I saw what happened in Amsterdam. Like when I woke up on Wednesday, I felt bigotry of one kind. I was like, why are these people even allowed to vote? I mean, come on. Like, what on earth is the matter with you? Let's just ban people from voting. Because that worked out great. That's worked out great for our country before, right? Then I woke up on what happened on Amsterdam, and I'm just sort of like, all right, so you're just going to give me as a Jew to feel permission for Israel to do whatever it wants to anyone it wants, anytime it wants, because clearly you just don't. It doesn't matter to you all that much, like whether or not Jews are safe. So save me from all of your sermonizing about the people who are causing the suffer, because you don't really care about that much about my suffering. That was also kind of how I felt like when I woke up that day, which I suppose is also a little bit of, I'm using the word bigotry deliberately because I feel like you use the word bigotry, you're calling yourself a bigot. It's a very strong word to use, but I'm using it about myself. I don't know anyone ever, but that's how I felt. That really was how I felt. But as you said, you're doing the real work, it surprised you. The day after the election, I only had one person reach out to me and ask me how I was doing. Now, I'm not really someone, but the one person who reached out to me was the woman that we sold ACI's chamids to for Passover this year. Her name is Rana Abdel Hamid, and Rana grew up in Astoria. She runs a Muslim women's self-defense organization called Malika, and she is very much does not hold my views about Israel. Like if I go to her social media page, I'll see all the buzzwords that I really hold by. But at like 10 o'clock on Wednesday morning, she texted me a message and said, I just wanted to see how you're doing. That's not to guilt trip any of you for not texting me. Right? But the fact that she wrote me, I was like, wow, wow, I can't believe that someone wrote. I can't believe that she of all people wrote me on that morning. But she did. She did. So I don't know. I think that's also just when it says you sanctify through humanity. It's that people surprise you. People also surprise you. Sam?
Yeah, well, I think just this is also why it's why do we go back to these characters and their stories is because they're totally irrational, right? And so I do think you're right that it's intentionally vague, because I think the rabbis are just well, I don't know, Noah built a ship and everybody thought he was nuts. And sure enough, like here we are today. And I think it's meant to like create that tension, right? That the rabbis want you to work. They want you to work for it, but they don't have a good answer about like God clearly, they're like, well, we have a record of God rewarding righteousness. That's the best we can do, right?
Yeah. I guess I'm a little less depressed by the statement of like that's the best we can do. Like, but I take your point. It's also like I think that I do sometimes like wonder, like I just try to remind myself how little access I have to a person's like inner monologue that's going on. Like, Brighton, what was the main question you spoke about in your Devar Torah last week? Poor Brighton. I'm making him remember his Devar Torah from last week. He's probably forgotten already. No? Yeah. And what's one of the reasons why it doesn't seem clear that Noah's really all that special? Like, what does he not do when God tells him to build this ark? Yeah, like he built the ark for 150 years. That's a lot of time to like warn people. And he doesn't say anything. You don't have a record of him saying anything. And it's funny, right? Like Abraham is sort of this way too, who we're going to read about momentarily, right? Like Abraham or Avram, he hasn't gotten his full name yet, right? Like there are times that God tells Abraham to do things and he just kind of does them without saying anything. There's like no reference to it. And I think to myself, like, I used to think that this meant like something really bad about them. Like, how could you not say anything? But I also realized that like I don't have any access to like what's going on in their head. Like, I don't know that, like, it's hard. So I just start to wonder like what's going on in their head. And so I think that's also like something where I can't draw too many conclusions about why a person believes what they believe or decide what they decide. I don't have access to their mind. In that sense, I feel like maybe it's blessed that God's tension here is what says it's a little bit of a curse in a backwards sort of way. It's sort of like, I'm not going to destroy all of you, but you've got to figure out how to manage each other. And that may be harder than you might be wishing for a flood at that point. Like, I don't know. It's a lot of stream of consciousness today. But I also imagine that you've all had your own stream of consciousness this week. All right. I'm sorry?
It's been a week.
It has been a week, and it's weird, right? Because it's contradictory information, right? I revealed who I voted for. No one has to say who they voted for, except I already said who I voted for, right? But I also voted for, an amendment that this state passed in its constitution that made abortion rights stronger, not weaker. So, I mean, that's a good thing, like a very good thing. In my eyes, it's a very, very good thing. And do I not celebrate that thing I think is good? Because this other thing happened that I think is not good, to put it mildly. Like I don't, the state I grew up in, my home state of Maryland, also some state, we elected our first African American senator on Wednesday. And Delaware, right? Delaware did too. Yeah.
Delaware had the first chance ever.
Oh, right. Right. So but that's weird. It's weird to like sit with those like things that I thought were good. Or very good. I mean, I would call them very good, but like there's other thing that happened that I didn't. So it reminds me that humanity can do those things. Like I'm not that, I'm not young anymore, but I don't know. If you had told 20-year-old me that there would be someone who was born with a different, identity, like a gender identity, who would then change it and then serve in Congress. I don't think I would have believed you. maybe even 5 years ago, I don't know if I would believe you. That's, so people are strange in that way. And with that, let's talk about a really strange person named Avram. I don't know if he's that strange, but you don't have a Chumash, you should.
Talk about he almost killed his own son. Very strange.
What?
He almost killed his own son's very strange behavior.
It's funny because yesterday at Hannah, my oldest daughter's day school, they invite you every couple of months, parents, to come to like one of the Jewish studies classes and study with your kid. It was very sweet. So I was there yesterday. We were talking about Abraham, and I remembered that most of the time when Abraham is told to do something really outlandish, he doesn't say anything and just does it. Like, the funny thing is, we usually remember the story people love to talk about Abraham is that Abraham is told to talk about these two cities, Sodom and Gomorrah, Sodom and Amorah, and he argues with God, says, what if there are 50 righteous people? But actually that example is the exception, not the rule. Most of the time Abraham's told, go sacrifice your son. And then the next thing it says, well, he got up the next day to take his son out and slaughter him. The story we read in my daughter's class was about Hagar. Sarah says, I don't like Hagar anymore. Get rid of her. And Abraham doesn't say anything. He just gets rid of her. It's weird. But on the other hand, this is also the same guy who argues about Sodom and Gomorrah. People are strange. And I guess Abraham is kind of strange too. Yeah. Okay. So we're gonna go ahead in our Sidurim to page 139 for Ein Kamocha. Ein kamocha ba'Elohim Adonai v'ein k'ma'asecha malchutecha malchut kol olamim u'memshaltecha b'chol dor v'dor Adonai melech Adonai malach Adonai yimloch le'olam bo'ed Adonai oz le'amo yitein Adonai yivarech et amo b'shalom aparachamim etiva v'irtzoncha et Zion tivnei chomon Yerushalayim tivnei chomon Yerushalayim Ki v'chal batachnu melech el ram v'nisa adon olamim. We rise, page 139, middle of the page. Vahi vitzo Aharon vayomer Moshe kuma Adonai v'yafutzu oivecha v'yanutzu v'sanecha mipanecha ki mitzion tetzei Torah ki mitzion tetzei Torah u'devar Adonai Yerushalayim Baruch Shenatan Torah Baruch Shenatan Torah Le'amo Yisrael B'kedushato. Page 140. Ve'anarachis V'lishmei Kadisha Yakira Anai Martush Bekan Yera'aba Kadama Detiv Libi Yoraita Betashmi Mishali Delibi Beli Badechol Amach Yisrael Letabo Chayim Ve'elishlam Amen. 141. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Echad Eloheinu Gadol Adonenu Kadosh Shemo. Echad Eloheinu Gadol Adonenu Kadosh Shemo. Gadol Adonai Iti. Unarama Shemo Yachad Lecha Adonai Hakitula V'Hakivura V'Hatiferet V'Hanetzah V'Hod Kivod Hashemayim U'Haaretz Adonai Hamalacha V'Hamitase L'Chol L'Rosh Ramenu, Adonai Eloheinu, Vehishkakabu, L'Adon Rama Kadoshu. Ramenu, Adonai Eloheinu, Vehishkakabu, L'Adon Kikarosh Adonai Eloheinu. Oh, you're going today? Okay, great. Like Susan is out. Hey, you can be seated. Our Torah readers this morning is, I believe, David's reading 1 and 2, and Janet, you're reading number 3. Would anyone like to have an aliyah to the Torah for the first aliyah? Sounds like raise his hand and then put it right down. No?
I'll do it, yeah.
Yeah, okay. You can do the first one, and anyone want to have the second one? But he can have the third one. I'll sign Brighton, but it's your reading Torah for that one. Brighton's like, what did I do? I was minding my own business, and okay. And Lauren can have the second one. Okay. Oh, thanks, Eric. There we go.
Is it the Sarah?
Yeah, that's all right. You're in the third Trinity.
Ya Zor Yagin Biashir Lachal Chosim Bavram Aramein
Amen.
Akal Havu Gadol Henu Tukav Torah Ein Kan Kohen Ya'amod.
Sam, you're
Shimon ben Mordechai.
Yeah.
Shimon Mordechai Aliyah Rishon Baruch Shesanto Armo Yisrael B'Kusha So V'Atemet Begin B'Raya Lechem Fein Kulchem Hayom. The first Aliyah can be found on page 86, verse 1.
Baruch atah Adonai Hamarah.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch atah Adonai Hamarah Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten ha'Torah.
Amen.
Amen. V'sarai Eshed Avram lo yada lo v'la Shicha Mitzri Rishma Hagar V'tomer Sarai el Avram Hinena Atzarani Adonai Miledet Bona El Shechati V'la Yibana Mimena V'yishma Avram L'kol Sarai V'tikach Sarai Eshed Avram Elagar hamitzrit shivchata miketz 10 shanim shevet Avram be'eretz Canaan v'titanota le'Avram isha lo le'isha v'yavo el Hagar v'tahar v'terek ki harata v'tikag birta b'neha ותאמר שרה אל אברהם, חמסי עליך אנוכי, נתתי שפחתי בחיקך ותרקי, הרעת ויקע בעיניה, ישפוט אדוני ביני ובינך. ויאמר אברהם אל שרי, הנה שפחתך בידך, עשי לה הטוב בעינייך, ותהנה שרי ותברח מפניה.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'hayeh olam notah b'toheinu Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Yamod Chayasara Bachlama Betova La'aliyah Sheni. The second aliyah can be found on page 87, verse 7.
Baruch Adonai Hambarach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayimtza malach Adonai al ein hamayim bamidbar al ha'ayin b'derech shur. Vayomar Hagar shichat sarai imitzvat v'yanatzechi v'tomer mipnei sarai gevurti anochi borachat. Vayomer lamalach Adonai shuvi al gevurtech v'hit ani tachat yadeha. Vayomer lamalach Adonai.
That's the next aliyah.
I'll give her tachit v'hit ani tachat yadah.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher natan lanu Torah emet v'chayei olam notah b'tocheinu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen. Next aliyah. Who's the next aliyah?
Janet's reading Torah.
And
Come on. It was just a week ago. And you did wonderfully.
Comes from a Chuck.
You promised.
No, he didn't.
give me his name. He's obligated to come up.
Benjamin
I have to say, I thought that was a brilliant strategy.
Levi.
I'm going to try that.
Okay.
Okay, fine.
Amen. Ya'amod Binyamin Levi Bat Chaya Le'aliyah Hashlishi.
Brighton. Come on, I'll do it with you.
I'll do it with you.
We'll all do it.
It's a team effort.
All right, anyway. What's up?
Ya'amod Ruth Bat Sarah Abraham La'aliyah Shlishi. Oh, I'll tell you where it is. It's by Yomer Law.
This was the end, right?
Baruch Adonai Hambarach.
Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed.
Baruch atah Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher bachar banu mikol ha'amim v'natan lanu et Torato. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
Amen. Vayomer lamalach Adonai arbet
tzarech, v'lo yisafer marov. Vayomer lamalach Adonai, hanach hara, I'm sorry. Hinach hara yoladet ben, v'karat shemo Yishmael, Yishma Adonai el aniach, v'hu ahiyeh para adam, yado v'chol v'yad kol bo, v'yal pnei kol achai v'yishon, v'tikra Shem Adonai hadover eleha ata'al Ro'i ki amar hagam hello ra'iti acharei ro'i elkin karav laver ve'er l'chai ro'i kanabin kodash bin barak Betel et Hagar, Abraham bein Yikra, Abraham Shemana Vano, Asher Yelda Hagar Ishmael, Abraham King Shmonim Shana V'Shesh Shanim, Yuledet Hagar et Ishmael
Abraham.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam, asher natan lanu Torah tanet, v'chai olam notav b'tochenu. Baruch atah Adonai noten haTorah.
Amen.
We're going to recite a Misha Berach, Lacholim, a special prayer for those in need of healing. If you have any, as a reminder for any of our first timers, so each week we read a list of names that people send to the synagogue who are sick and that we'd like to have people be extra mindful of. If there's someone that's not on this list that you'd like to have added, when I reach the pause, you can say out loud a name or multiple names that you have in mind. Mishaberach Avotinu Abraham Yitzchak Yaakov Sarai Barakov Leah Hu Yivarech Yereped HaCholim Mindy Zimmerman, Raina Rosendorf, Chiamina Bat Asna, Menachem Mendel, Yonah ben Bela Yaakov, Shalom ben Chaim, Hedi bat Evelyn, Rachel bat Eleonora, Joel Tarlo, Aaron Vajda, Zalman Mordechai, Aaron ben Yehudit, Adina bat Guta, Shoshana bat Toda, Gary Lefkowitz, Harold Lefkowitz, Eric Laxman, Michael Stos, Pesach Ruchel bat Dina, Tzvi Hirsch bar Esther, Faith Braunschweig, Deborah Ramirez, Sherwin Liff, Harav Yaakov ben Esther, Jack Demshek, Dina bat Brina, Tovan bat Sarah, Fegalea bat Devorah, Larry Oppenliner, Sarah Chana bat Ziso, Bedov Beryl, Ben Reb Chaim Halevi, Shalom ben Peril, Shaul ben Sarah, Dov Shlomo ben Esther. Other names? Any other names to speak? Hakadosh Baruch Hu Yemel Rachamim Aleihem Lachzikam Lara Botam Bishlach Lem V'Shema Min Hashamayim Refuat HaNefesh Refuat HaGuf Shabbat Ki Midli Zor Refuat Kavalavo Hashabag Alav Yizman Karib and Omar Amen. Please rise for the Chatzi Kaddish. Yikadal v'yikadash shemei Rabba v'yamani brachirute v'yamlich malchute v'chayechonu v'yameichonu v'chayedechol be'Yisrael Bagala v'izman karib v'yimeru Amen Yeshmei Rabba mebarach le'olam yomei omaya Yisbarach v'yishtabach V'yipar v'yitramam v'yitnase v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitala Shmei kudsha v'yitleila min kol birchata v'shirata tushmechata v'nechemata damira v'yalama v'yimeru Amen.
Ya'amdu Hagba v'Galila.
Do we have anybody who would like to lift the Torah and perhaps dress it?
I'm happy to lift it.
Yeah? Okay. Anyone willing to dress it? David, we're putting you to work today. Yeah?
Robin, you want to do it?
Oh, Sam is valid. Okay. No, we're not. We're going to do some harsher stuff.
Got it. Okay.
So please remain standing.
V'zot haTorah asher sama Moshe lifnei bnei Yisrael al pi Adonai b'yad Moshe ki metzion tetzei Torah u'bar Adonai mirushalayim 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 ki metzion tetzei Torah u'bar Adonai mirushalayim. There should be enough copies that are getting passed back. Shark of them.
And everyone can be seated again. Open Door Shabbat, there is no sermon of the public speech variety, but we do so on the Torah portion. And I want to actually focus on one particular text here about Abraham, who I was kind of dissing a little bit earlier for all the things he doesn't say. So if you turn to the back page, you'll see there's a passage here from the Talmud about Abraham. It says, Rav Hanan ben Rabbah says that Rav says, it's like 4 different rabbis talking about who says what, that's a whole other thing. Our forefather Abraham was imprisoned for 10 years because he rejected idol worship and was accepted in his land. He was imprisoned for 3 years in the city of Kuta, 7 years in Kardu, and Rav Didi on Kardu teaches the opposite. He was imprisoned 7 years in Kuta, 3 years in Kardu. Rav Chisda says the small passage of Kuta, this is Ur of the Chaldeans, it is the city that he is born from. So I just want to pause because the first line is the most important. It says Abraham was imprisoned for 10 years. How does that kind of impact our understanding of like who? Again, this is like an explanation. It's what we would call like a midrash or interpretation. So whether or not it's true is less important than just like what it tells us about it. So what is it? How does your picture of like Abraham as you thought about it change when you hear a Jewish text that says, well, Abraham was actually put in jail for 10 years? For what he believed. I have one more copy, by the way, if anyone doesn't have one. Yeah? Okay. Anyone? Abraham was put in jail for 10 years. Well, it's first, so when we think that someone was in prison, often our minds go into a place that he wasn't that good. Now, in this case, he's in jail for sort of like as a protest kind of person, but you know, it's interesting. Maybe he's put in jail because they just didn't like him for what he believed, or that he was kind of a jerk to people about sharing what he believed. It's possible it could be either one, but yeah, Lynn.
This highlights how they call it, and the fact that it's imprisonment is never mentioned in the Bible. Kind of makes it seem like it wasn't relevant at all to the story, because that's not the main story in the people.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fantastic point. One of the strange things about Abraham, I think I may have talked about this at some point in the past, but as you know, my rule is like never assume that anything you say on the beam will ever be remembered ever again. That Abraham is, although we describe him as like the first Hebrew, the first Israelite, the first Jew, he's very different from the first person associated with basically any other religion. like whether it's Buddha or Jesus or Muhammad. In that, what's different about him is that there's no story, there's no origin story about how he ends up being Abraham. It just says like one day that God comes along and tells this guy to leave, and he does. But there's no backstory to it. In contrast, by the way, to Moses, right? Moses, we have a backstory. We have some kind of idea of why he might be the person, but even that, but Abraham, there's none. And so, you know, it leads to some interesting interpretations about like what the backstory might have been, right? So one backstory here is that apparently whatever it was he believed was controversial enough that people put him in jail. What's that? So it's funny because what makes interpretation so interesting is that like when nothing's there giving you the exact answer, all kinds of answers can be created that fill the void. So there's this passage in this week's Parsha that says that that Abraham and Sarah brought with them souls that they took from Haran. And like it's a very strange like word, it doesn't really interpret it, but like the general consensus of the rabbis is that they interpret this to mean that they were converting people. Now, at the time of Abraham, there is no such thing as conversion because there's no Judaism, right? So whether or not that's true, I don't know. But but to your point, it's sort of like it's like a vacuum that gets filled with these very, very different answers. Because like there's no people in the Torah that we talk about sitting around trying to convince people to become Israelite or Jewish. Like it's not even on the table. That's how the rabbis interpret it. So I guess they're trying to make sense of this like vacuum of information about him. David?
When I hear about people who spend time with a person, for whatever the reason, one of the things that comes to mind is that they become more submissive. They lose control of their lives and they spend accepting authority perhaps when they go out. And that's very much in line with what we were talking about earlier, where Abraham does what he's told, doesn't go back.
Oh, interesting. So maybe maybe he doesn't say as much because he's more concerned about that. It's so interesting. I never thought about it that way. That's such an interesting, such an interesting point. Listen again. The rabbis of the Talmud, right, are writing this text with a memory, a very present memory, and a not too distant past memory, where they're told they can't practice. Like it's funny, right? Because Abraham, that's a thing that's interpreted back into the story. There's no evidence if you just read the text that like Abraham, that anyone has any problem with Abraham following this God. He interacts with like other people, but they're mostly like fighting over like land or money, or when he horrifyingly pretends that his wife is his sister, but like it has nothing to do with him being like picked on for his beliefs. It has other things. There's no real evidence that Isaac or Jacob are that way. Like so, but the rabbis, say like, well, that's so much a part of our experience, like at their time. And I think to be a Jew in 2024, I would say like it resonates with me. Like, yeah, of course, right? Why wouldn't Abraham have been like treated badly because he was a Jew? Isn't that like that's a part of like Jewish history? Why wouldn't it be a part of Abraham's history? Again, there's not like a right kind of answer to it, but it's very jarring, to think about if we assume that him becoming who he was a dramatic change. The answers of what it must have looked like are kind of wild, because that story is not told in the Torah. I don't know if there's a reason why its absence is there. But it's also just a reminder about like how there are people who can go through a complete change. Like in some sense, like Abraham is just like a totally new person. That's what they want us to understand. And not everybody likes people when they become totally new people. For a whole bunch of reasons, but I think it's interesting to think about. My reaction when I first was reminded of this text was was thinking of Abraham like the way we think about people who were oppressed, put in jail, and then got out of jail, and were able to, do good for other people, while they were, because of that, Martin Luther King Jr., Nelson Mandela, the exonerated five that used to be called the Central Park Five, like people, like that's also a narrative to tell. That's the one that first came to mind to me, but it's also a little self-serving for me to say that about Abraham. Like there's no evidence that anyone cared that Abraham believed all of this. He didn't do good in the world the way, say, like the Central Park Five did when they got out of jail. But it's fascinating. If you have any other interpretations about it, I'd love to know it, because it kind of blew my mind, the idea of thinking like Abraham was in jail as a part of all of this. Yes, what's up?
Well, the idea of going to jail for your beliefs is sort of a sacrifice. But in the context of the story, we already know that he was willing to sacrifice something like unimaginably bigger than that, his own child. So it doesn't change my sense of his character. I already know that someone who's willing to make sacrifices. But it makes me wonder which came first. Like, was he willing to sacrifice his son before he went to jail, or was it like a progression of greater willingness to sacrifice?
That's fantastic. I mean, that's an interesting point about like the degree of his threshold of pain, right? Like, well, we already know from the text in next week that he's gonna go and almost sacrifice his son. He came this close. So I guess the idea that he would be in jail for 10 years, I guess doesn't sound so crazy if you're willing to, willing to do that. And then also to David's point about coming out more submissive. He just like wants to do what he's told. Just wants to do what he's told. Yeah. Sam.
Yeah, I mean, so I think the thing I noticed, right, is that he goes to jail for rejecting idol worship, right? And I think part of what, and this to Litz's point a little bit, is like, you kind of imagine the story of Isaac, or this story that we are presented with in the text as the definitive moments, right? Having this child, right? And I don't know, it's just kind of weird to imagine this person walking around in a highly inhabited space where there are police who will, manage him for his willingness to fall to idols and worship idols. And that actually, like, that's the whole ball game in some way. I don't know, like, we remember in some ways, like, this story of being gifted this child in an unimaginable context. But there's there's this whole pre-story of like, I don't know, like Abraham in his 40s, like hanging out, not worshiping idols, kind of. And like, that's so cool. I don't know, like it seems so much more consistent than I imagined, right? The story I'm told is about this transformation, when in fact it's like about this durable trait that then gets built up into something bigger.
I love it. I'm gonna let that be the last comment. By the way, one of the open elements of Open Door Shabbat is that if we think that we should be doing more or less of something, it doesn't have to be the same each month. So this is our first one of the year. Some people have been to every one of them. Some of this is like your first one, but you also have the right to say like, I'd rather, be this way next time. But I want to, before we return the Torah to the Ark, we're going to do a prayer for our country. We pray for our country no matter what we might feel about it in any given week. That's on page 148. And then we'll recite a prayer for the state of Israel on 149. And then I will recite a prayer for the release of the remaining hostages, who I hope maybe now that this election is over, someone will focus on getting them finally released. So page 148, please rise. Our God and God of our ancestors, we ask your blessings for our country, for its government, for its leaders and advisors, and for all who exercise just and rightful authority. Teach them insights from your Torah that they may administer all affairs of the state fairly, that peace and security, happiness and prosperity, justice and freedom may forever abide in our midst. Creator of all flesh, bless all the inhabitants of our country with your spirit. May citizens of all races and creeds form a common bond in true harmony to banish hatred and bigotry and to safeguard the ideals and free institutions that are the pride and glory of our country. May this land under your providence be an influence for good throughout the world, uniting all people in peace and freedom, helping them fulfill the vision of your prophet. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they experience war anymore. And let us say, Amen. Top of 149. Avinu Shabbat Shemayim, Sor Yisrael v'go'alo, Barech Medinat Yisrael, Rishit Smikaku Latenu, Hagen Allah Bevrat Chastecha Ufros Allah Sukat Shlomecha, Ushlach Orchav Yamichal Rashat Sarav Yatzah, V'taknein Beitzat Tova Milfanecha, Azek Idei Miginei Eretz Kachenu, V'ankilem Eloheni Yeshua V'atar Nitzachon Tatrem, V'natata Shalom Ba'aretz V'timchato Lam Leoshvea, V'nomar Amen. Mishaberach Avatenu Abraham Yitzhak Yaakov Sarar Karakav Allahu Yivarech V'yishmor V'yinsor Neretz V'agan Al Yisrael U'shviyav V'kolachenu Hanatinim B'tzara V'shivya Ba'avur Shekal Hagal Kadosh Hazem Yipalal Ba'avuram Hagadosh Baruch Hu Yom Lerachmim Aleichem V'yotziem Nechoshek L'sal Mavet V'sortem Yinatek U'msukotem Yoshem V'shivem Me'era L'chek Mishpachotehem Yodu L'Adonai Chasdo V'niflotav L'Gnei Adam V'kuyem Bahem Mikra Shekatu V'nei Adonai Yeshuvu M'bat Zion B'rina V'simchat Olam Al Rosham Sason V'simcha Yesigu V'naso Yagon Ba'anacha V'nomar Amen. We turn ahead to page 153 as the Sefer Torah is returned to the Ark. Hallelujah, Shem Adonai, Kiskav, Shem Olvado, Hodo, Val Eretz, V'Shamayim, V'Yamaret, Eret Le'amo, Tila L'Kol, Asiyah, V'Nei Yisrael, Puro, Hallelujah, Hallelujah, Mizmor L'Tavir, Habu Adonai B'Nelim, Habu Adonai Kavod Baz, Habu Adonai Kivod Shmo, Hishachabu Adonai B'Hadra Kodesh, Kol Adonai Al-Hamayim, Melech Hirim, Adonai Al-Mayim Rabim, Kol Adonai B'Koach, Kol Adonai B'Hadar, Kol Adonai Shober Arazim, Vaishaber Adonai Et Arzei Hamanot, Vayartiem Keloigal, Ulam B'Siro, Kimo B'Reim, Kol Adonai Kotzem Lavotesh, Kol Adonai Yaakov Mibar, Yachil Adonai Mibar Kadesh, Kol Adonai Yechol Elai Alot, Vayechasof Ye'amot, Ubehechalo Kulo Omer Kavod, Adonai Lamabuya, Shema Yeshem Adonai Melech Leolam, Adonai Oz V'Yamo Yiteh, Adonai Yivarech Adonai Lovat Shalom, Yom Yomar. Ki lekachto natati lachem Torati al tazovu et chayimhi lamachazim kiva v'tomcheha meushar derachecha dar v'chol netivoteha shalom hashivenu Adonai lecha v'nashuva kadesh yameinu yekedem. You may be seated. We turn ahead in page 184 for Kaddish Shalem. Quinn, can you do me a favor? Any kiddos here who want like some of my candy, this is probably a good time for them to return to the sanctuary. You mind going to find them? Going to tell them? Thanks, Quinn. Page 184. I now have to hide this in my office because they know where it is. They're just going to take it while I'm not around. It's all good. Page 184. Yitkadal v'yikadash shemei rabba v'yamadi rachirute v'yamlich malchute v'chayechonu v'chonu chayidechol beit Yisrael v'agalav yisman kariv imro amen yehe shmei rabba mebarach v'yalam yamei amaya yiparach yishtabach Vipar Richaman beat Nasebi, Tadar Vitalevi, Talas Renikucha, Brihule, Lamin Kol, Birkatam, Shiratab, Chudabanaka, Matan, Rambia, Mabimru, Amen, Tikabas, Lokon, Nufal Israel, Kodamahon, Divishmaya, Bimru, Amen, Yeh, Shlomaraba, Minshmaya, Bechaim, Alena, Vial, Yisrael, Bimru, Amen, Oh, Se Shalom, Rama, Puyasa, Shalom, Alena, Vial, Yisrael, Vimru, Amen. We continue on 182 with Ein Kelohenu. Ein Kelohenu, Ein Kadonenu, Ein Kemalkeinu, Ein Kemoshienu, Mi Kelohenu, Mi Kadonenu, Mi Kemalkeinu, Mi Moshienu, Nodel Eloheinu, Nodel Adonenu, Nodel Malkeinu, Nodel Moshienu, Baruch Eloheinu, Baruch Adonenu, Baruch Malkeinu, Baruch Moshienu, Atahu Eloheinu, Atahu Adonenu, Atahu Malkeinu, Atahu Moshienu, Atahu Shetiru Avotenu, Lefanecha et Ketoret Hasamim, En Kelohenu, En Kadonenu, En Kemalkeinu, En Kemoshienu. Page 183, we'll recite the Aleinu quietly. Please rise. Kakatu b'toratecha Adonai yimloch le'olam bo'ed v'nemar v'haya Adonai le'melech al kol haaretz v'yom hahu yeh Adonai echad u'shemo echad. May be seated this week. The Hebrew day, the 8th day of the Hebrew month of Mar Cheshvan, we observe the following yard sites here at ACI. Joseph Steinhardt, Doris Brownstein, Jacob Bernstein, Fanny Pastilnik, Sadie Splorovsky, Sam Wygod, Max Berkowitz, Beatrice Hamby, Hyman Michael, Isidore Cohn, Jenny Leinwall, Jenny Braunschweig, Rosalie K. Kirshen, Abraham Mischler, Minnie Meischig Weisberg, Bessie Zippis, Alexander Lindy, Isaac Roth, Herta Pressler, Edith Groupman, Sarah Schallison, David G. Steiner, Rose Kaplan, Estelle Reef. Those who are mourning, those who are observing yard site, please rise, page 184 for the mourner's Kaddish. Yit Gadal ve'yit Kadash Shemei Rabbah, B'yalma Divarach Yeruteh, B'yamlich Malchuteh, V'chayechon, V'yomechon, V'chayedechol Beit Yisrael, Bagala Bisman Karivi Mru Amen. Yehe Shme Rabba Mavarach Leolam Omea Maya. Yiparach Vishtabach Vipar Vitromam Vitnase. Vitadar Vitalev Vitalal Shme Kutsha Brichu. La'ela Min Ko Birkata Bashirata. Tush Birata Benechamata Damiram Bialma Bim Ramen. Yehe Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya. V'chaim Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael Bim Ramen. Oseh Shalom Bim Ramav, Hu Yaseh Shalom Aleinu V'al Kol Yisrael Ve'imru Amen. Janet, do you want to do announcements? No? All right. It's okay. So I'll just do a very quick one. So after Adon Olam, we have a potluck lunch downstairs. Anybody is welcome, even if you didn't bring a potluck dish. You're giving me a thumbs up for that. Excellent. That's announcement number one. Announcement number two is that you should have seen in the Friday flyer that we are not having Shabbat morning services the Saturday of Thanksgiving weekend, based on just kind of where people will be and the capacity to have a minyan. But I want to let people know ahead of time. Please consider next week that I started this past Friday at noon on Zoom, a 30-minute pre-Shabbat meditation. It's all virtual. I'm going to do it probably like about a month, even if it's just me by myself, to see if there's any interest in it at all. But one of the big challenges we have is that different times of day are good for different people to do things with the shul. So, what? Friday at noon. So yeah, if it does, much like Open Door Shabbat, if an experiment doesn't work, then I just put that on the shelf and I try another one. Reminder that today was our first day of our Pathways to Judaism course. So we have people who have been at the shul for the first time. Please make sure that you introduce yourself and welcome them here. And next week, I hope you will all consider coming to Shabbat morning services, because I am actually not going to be here. And Audrey, I like to call her Rabbi Audrey. Did she leave? Yes. She left? Okay. Well, yeah. So Audrey, who leads junior congregation here and has also done B'nai Mitzvah tutoring for us, is going to be our guest rabbi on Shabbat morning. I'm going to be speaking about organ donation at a Reformed temple in the city from my day job. So, but please come out here to support Audrey, because we love Audrey. And so I'm sure whatever she'll do next week will be great. We conclude with the singing of Adon Olam, page 187. Following that, Kiddushin Hamotzi. Yes, you can come on. Adon Olam Asher Malach B'Terem Kol Yitzir Nivra Li'enasa B'Chapso Kol Azai Melech Shemo Nikra Azai Melech Shemo Nikra V'Yacharei Kiklot HaKol Levado Yimloch Nora V'Hu Haya V'Hu Hoveh V'Hu Yiyeh V'Tifara V'Hu Yiyeh V'Tifara V'Hu Echad V'Yein Sheni Leham Shilo Lehach Bira B'Li Reshit B'Li Tachli B'Lo Ha'oz V'Hamisra B'Lo Ha'oz V'Hamisra V'Hu Eli V'Chayroli V'Tzur Gadli V'Yein Tzara V'Hu Nisi Umanosli Menat Kosi B'Yom Ekra Menat Kosi B'Yom Ekra Ve'yado Avkir Ruchi V'Yetishan V'Ayira Ve'im Ruchi Giviyati Adonai Li V'Lo Ira Adonai Li V'Lo Ira. Shabbat Shalom, everybody. Take one. I don't have any lollipops. There are? Yes. Apparently you know what's in my house better than I do. You don't want one of these then, Irving? You've come to my office and taken them many times. Sure you don't want them? I'll see if I have lollipops, but
Ah.